Hello, my name's Rob and welcome to Swift Slots. So what have I got on my bench this time? Well, it's a Carrera Go, 1/43rd scale. Now for those that don't know, and I'm sure many of you do, but there are some that don't know, Carrera Go is Carrera's entry-level slot cars in 43rd scale for children, I guess. There are a lot of adults out there that race them very well. They do some lovely tracks, but I think probably primarily these cars are entry-level children's toys. But there are potentially good performance in the cars and people can get the performance out, and that's exactly what I intend to do in this video. So I'll bring you on the bench and I'll show you what pile of goodies I've got to stuff in this car. So the whole point of this project is to see how fast I can get this little Carrera Go around Crow Valley, which is an MDF routed wooden track. And of course, it'll be magnetless. And that's the real challenge. How quick can we get this little car completely customized around an MDF wooden track? Let's just see. So, here's my poor little victim. It's just about to have a rocket stuffed up its derriere. As you can see, it's a very, very nice little Porsche Carrera Go car. I really like these cars. They're extremely pretty little cars. There's not a lot about them that really says toy. I mean, they are toy grade, I suppose, but they really are quite decent quality. Very nice. So that's the car. I've got a nice wood guide, or a guide, slotting plus guide to go in. I've got an upgraded motor. Oh, I'd not actually tried these motors. I hope they're upgraded. They're pendle slot motors, 16,000 RPM. I've had a little bit of a test in there, and the axle, the shaft size is the same. Not that that would stop me from putting it in if it wasn't. And it does actually fit in there. It will actually go. So I'm hoping that this has got a higher performance. One assumes that it does. Nice little motor though, really, really cute. So that's going in there. The back tyres are being changed for these pendle slot tyres. Now these are 32 1/3/8. I don't actually know what size they are, but they seem to measure up quite nicely to the tyre on the Carrera. So I pull that one off. So there we are. They are, let me measure the diameter for you. So the Carrera tyre is, let's call it 16.5mm for the sake of argument. And this one is, without truing, and that's important, 16.73mm. See, it just about holds between there. So by the time they've been trued, you've lost 0.5mm. They will come down to the size of these tyres here. Now you will actually notice that they're quite a bit wider. And that's deliberate, because where this thing's going, it's going to need all the help it can get. So I think there's enough room in there to get these big meats on the back. So you might be wondering to yourself, well, that's all very good. What's this piece of aluminium bar doing on your desk, Rob? Well, this is where this car gets a twist. This piece of aluminium bar is going on there. That's right. I should be making my own alloy wheels from this metal bar from scratch. And then I should be taking these wheels themselves, taking out the wheel centers and putting them into my own homemade alloy wheels. I'm sure that I could find some alloy wheels if I looked hard enough to go on this car, but it would be a bit of an uphill struggle, I'm sure. And I want to make my own wheels. That's what this channel is about. It's about taking stuff and forcing the issue and creating something from nothing. That's what I enjoy doing. I enjoy the challenge of it. So that's going to have homemade alloy wheels on the back with these wheels of inserts. It's going to have these tyres made to fit my alloy wheels. And it's also going to have a pair of brass bushings in the front to take away the standard plastic. And it's going to have a full-size slot guide. So that's the plan. Let's see if we can get it into practice. Okay, so I've got my measurements all worked out here on the back of a fag paper, as you can see, and I've come to these measurements through a process of removing these wheels and tyres, or wheel and tyre, and working it all out. So this replacement tyre is approximately 10 mil, more or less. So 10 mil brings me, and I can't go further than the outside of this wheel. This wheel is completely flush to the body, I've checked that. So 10 mil brings me right to the inside of that bulkhead there. So that's where my tyre will sit. So these measurements here, this gap here, I haven't actually drawn that in there, to be fair, so I need to draw that in. That's 120 thou. So 0, 1, 20, which is basically 3 mil. So that inset is basically 3 mil. This inset ends up being approximately 4 mil. So 7 mil in total. So if we bring 7 mil to the back of that bulkhead, which is where the wheel will sit, we get to right on there. So we get all of the shaft that's going to be available is going to be sitting all inside this wheel. So you get 100% contact, and then there'll be a grub screw somewhere going down in there in the middle line, obviously. So that's how we get to these measurements here. The 410 thou ends up being, let's get this tallied over, the 410 thou, which is pretty much, let's call it there for the sake of half a thou, will give me just about enough meat left on that wheel rim to not touch the spoke. So it'll just be a little tiny rim left. So then that will sit just inside here like this, and there'll be the spokes. They will just get a little tiny bit of rim that just rests inside the inside face of that wheel, and then you'll be onto the spokes, and that whole center then will just fit into this recess, which is also 120 thou. Another thing I've forgotten to put here, but that's fine, I know it anyway. So that's 120 as well. So 120 on either side, which is 3 mil on either side, leaves us with about 4 mil in the middle. So that's that. And I've gotten to the overall width of this wheel with 390 thou by cutting this piece here, which is 390 thou in there, and eyeballing it inside the tyre with my eyepiece, just seeing how much aluminium sticking out either side of the tyre. When I was happy with that, that gave me my width, which is 390 thou. So that's how I've got to the overall width. The overall height is governed honestly by the original wheel, 470 thou, 470 thou, and then this wheel fits quite nicely into that tyre without too many problems. That's a decent little stretch over. That's going to be absolutely fine, and by the time it's all trued, that'll all be perfect. And this gap, the depth of the tongue here, when it's placed on something like this drill, for example, and the rubber is all pulled in nice and square, you can then measure the depth of the groove on here, which is about 1 mil, 40 thou, and 120 thou wide. And there's still plenty of meat left on the tyre to true, because they're basically copying this wheel effectively, but using this tyre. So that's it. Nothing more to do but to get on with the lathe. And that's it. 2 alloy wheels all made, ready to rock and roll. So I just left to put the tyres on, see if they fit. I bet and they will. There we go, there's one. And here's the other. There. All done. One pair of alloy wheels, all made, ready to mount on axles. So now the next step is to liberate this centre wheel detail and get it inside the middle of this wheel here. And I'll show you how I'm going to do that right now. This may seem a little bit heavy-handed, but I've often found a very large tool does the job with a lot less stress than a very small tool struggling. So I'm going to get right in there and just gently squeeze and get that gear off the axle. There it goes. Nice and slow. There you go. Well, not quite. A little bit of a wiggle. There you are. There. I didn't really stress anything particularly there. Just nice gentle pressure. And there he is. Safe and sound, no damage, off the car. Right. Off to the lathe again. Okay, I'm actually not going to do this first one in fast forward because this is something that a lot of people could actually do, albeit on a drill or something like that. So I'll slow this bit down and do this bit in real time. And it might be valuable. I'll do the second one in fast forward, but I'll show you this first one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the inside of my wheel. And I know I made these, but they're all the same if you buy the plain wheels. So I'm going to measure that in the inside jaws. And I'm going to zero my vernier. So now I know what that inside diameter is to the thou. I'm just double checking that, that's right. Right, now what I'm going to do is I know that I don't need any of this outer shoulder, so I'm going to whiz all that off straight away quickly now, and then we'll get down to the meat of it. Right, that's got all that mess away. So now what we can do is come in and measure that, what we've got left, and that's saying 57.5 thou. So you want to go half of that because it's a lathe. So that's going to be, well, we'll start at 25, we'll take 25 thou off, and then we'll come back and we'll do the last final hone. So there's 25 thou off, so we should be looking at about 7 thou left. Yeah, 8 thou. 8 thou is all we've got left. And do it, just take off, what's 4 thou. Like an idiot, I moved my cross slide, so I lost my point of reference, but I got it back. Right, okay, so that's fine, that's good enough. So now we've got that fitting onto there nicely. What we now need to do is part it off. So I just changed the tool in fast forward. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to line up the front of the cutter with the front of the wheel and get it exactly right. Okay, that's that. So that's great. Now I can zero my compound slide. Now I know that this depth of this rim where the insert's going to sit is 120 thou deep. And I know that my axle isn't going to come any further than the inner face of that wheel. So I've got 120 thou to play with, and I know that this wheel wants to sit roughly flush with the front of this wheel, but I'm going to play it safe, and I'm going to cut this wheel down to 100 thou. That gives me 20 thou to play with, which is half a mil. Half a mil is visually quite a lot. I may actually go 90. So let's just do 90. So if I move my cutter in 90 thou, and I'm just going to part the whole face off, just straight down to the axle, and that will be my insert done. And that's it, done. And there we are. 2 centre caps taken from the wheels, ready to go. So let's just clean them up and get them fitted to the wheel. So before I glue my inserts in, I do actually like to paint the insides of the wheels. So I'm just going to use my Tamiya paint pen to go inside the middle of this wheel and just paint them black. So then the next trick is to glue them in. So there are 2 different ways to do it. You can either pop it in with a bit of quick super glue around the edge and pop it in quick, or you could put it in like this and then fill up a knife with super glue and then pop the very thin super glue in on the corner. I think I'm going to go for the super glue first and pop it in afterwards trick, and hope that I'm quick enough before the glue grabs. So I'll just do that now on fast forward. And that's it. So if we just mount all these wheels onto the axles, fitting inside the wheel arch like that. There we are. I know the tyres are oversized at the moment, but we're just looking for the fitment within the confines of the body width, and as you can see, it fits just about as good as it did originally. Right, that's the wheels done. On to the next. So I think what we'll do now is we get a little bit destructive. We'll just take away all these other components that we don't need anymore and see what we got left. Right, now we've got a reasonably clean canvas to get to the next stage, which I think is getting the guide into place. And we'll start by drilling a hole right behind this hole here and getting ready to fit the guide. So, once we've drilled this hole to locate it more or less, I need to make a stack of plastic on here so that the guide has got somewhere to go, like I did on the last build. And the way I do that, this isn't particularly precise. I just need to cut some plastic card and then stack it up into a pile and glue it all together. So do a quick cut there, break it off, and then deburr it like that, just so that it's smooth and doesn't have any awkward ridges in it. And then cut it up into about 1/2 inch square. I don't think I need as many as I've cut, but that's fine. And then deburr each one of those again, so they don't get in our way when we're gluing, like that, and then snap them. And then we want to MEK them together quickly. So get each piece really wet with MEK to really, that one's actually got some paint on it, so I don't know about that one. Leave that one until last. So get him really wet, stack him on top, and really wet again on both sides. Stack him on top and really wet again. That one again, I've got a bit of paint, so we'll put that on the bottom. Oops, that one's trying to escape. Doesn't matter how messy you make this, because it's all going to be turned on the lathe anyway. So there we are. So there's your stack, and that one's got a bit of paint on it too. So we just scrape that gone. We just don't need that in the way. There, that'll do. Right, and then another stack on there. Right, so you end up with a nice stack of plastic card. Hold him under tension for a minute, squeeze him down nice and tight, and then get some more weld all the way around. So we really flooded it. We're aiming for a solid block of plastic card, something that we can really work with. So that's done that, and then once that's together, that'll hold itself together for the most part for now. And then I'm doing this quickly because it's all going to be done fairly briskly. Then we want to stick the whole pile onto the top here. I'm being quite liberal with the glue because I definitely want it to stick. And on the dry side that I've allowed to remain dry, you stick that on there like that. And ideally I want to put a little bit of weight on that overnight. This block of brass should do it, I think. And there we are. That'll be the Leaning Tower of Plastic card overnight. And after a few hours you end up with a mound of plastic card glued to a wooden dowel. Cut it off on the bandsaw, and then it's over to the lathe, Rob. And what we end up with after the lathe session is a little guide holder. I haven't bothered to go all the way up to the edge on this rim because a lot of it's going to be chopped off anyway to allow the clearance of the guide. So that's a 3.6mm hole for this particular guide holder, and that's a nice fit in there. But every guide is different, or at least every brand is probably different. So that fits in there nicely, and it will do once it's all cleared out. So the next job to do is opening up this hole to a finished size to suit the shoulder that I've turned on here, and then we can flat the bottom off of this once it's in situ. I have noticed that MEK doesn't glue this plastic. I fitted this little spacer in before I carried on, and the MEK, even overnight, didn't glue into this chassis. So that's now super glued in there. So there's just a little word of advice. This plastic doesn't MEK. So the next job is to open up this hole and get that fitting into there. And then I'm going to strip all the unwanted plastic out of this chassis and then glue this into there. And that's where we'll leave it for part one. So I've made the hole bigger, got my guide support in, cleaned up the chassis, cleaned out all the excess plastic that would be hard to get to with a file if the guide was into place, and got it all set up with some standard green zap. I'm going to leave that now for several hours, leaning forward so the glue kind of runs forward, because I've discovered that there was actually a gap just in here. I was going to fit it with the car body filler, but super glue would be perfectly well. So we'll leave that go now for several hours, let the super glue do its thing, and we'll come back to it in part two.